And so when you have ideas that you shouldn't go into debt, don't buy things unless you have the money for them, that's coming from Depression era generations before us that had those thoughts, that had those beliefs and pushed them down. You don't go into debt unless you can afford it. And I agree to an extent. If you're going to go into debt, make sure you have a plan to pay it off. You may not be able to afford it right now, but part of good debt is understanding the terms, using it responsibly, and having a plan to pay it off.
Welcome to Life After Corporate, your ultimate guide for making the leap from corporate leader to entrepreneur. I'm Deb Boulanger, entrepreneur, executive leader, and founder of the Launch Lab for Women Entrepreneurs. This is your time to break through the glass ceiling once and for all and get your ticket to the C-suite. Come back each week to get the leading strategies, advice, and tools that will give you the skills and confidence you need to replace your corporate paycheck. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome back to another episode of Life After Corporate, my friends. And if you're new to our show, welcome home. This is where you get the straight dope on what it really takes to launch and grow a successful, scalable, services-based business. And this past two episodes, we've been talking about money, show me the money. And we'll talk about this amazing new movie that has just hit the streets for private screenings in LA and New York, and we'll reveal all that in just a few minutes. But we're talking about the real trauma around mindset and money and seeking funding when you start up, and some of the financial mistakes that you're likely to make if you're not making conscious choices. And today my guest is Diana Greshtchuk. She is the founder of Fan Your Flame. She is a trauma-informed financial literacy coach for marginalized people, including women, LGBTQ, and BIPOC communities. And Diana, I am thrilled to welcome you to Life After Corporate. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Deb.
I'm so thrilled, super excited to have you. Diana and I are colleagues in a mastermind together, and I've just really fallen in love with her approach to women and money and funding, and just really your heart-centered and approach and taking all the scaries out. So I know we talked right before we hit the go live button that you have been in corporate. You've had traumatizing experiences in corporate, as I think most of us have. So what is your life after corporate story?
Yeah. So as soon as I graduated from college, I started work at one of the big four accounting firms who shall remain nameless, but I'm sure you can probably find it on my LinkedIn profile. And it's pretty standard for the industry that coming straight out of college, you move right into 100-hour work weeks for 4 to 5 months of the year minimum. And that is not sustainable. You put on 30 pounds, you develop a coping mechanism of a drinking problem, whatever it might look like, and you charge through and you push through. And I worked at that firm for 12 years trying to find ways that it aligned and ways that I could love it. And after working there for 12 years, I finally left and moved into private industry. And I haven't worked those kinds of hours since. And I haven't looked back. It taught me a lot, but certainly we're done.
And that enabled you to launch your business.
Correct. I am at a great place now for a day job. And that's one stream of income. But really, for impact, I launched my business. It's not even about the money. It's about changing the world.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And it's also a great model for people. Sometimes they forget that you can, if you can carve out the time and you have the right type of environment at your work, that you also can launch a business. Like, you're not the only one in our community who does that. And it's a beautiful way to ramp up. It's a beautiful way to start. And it's a beautiful way to make an impact through your work. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
You mentioned trauma-informed financial literacy coach. And what does that mean? Like, where is the trauma associated with financial literacy?
So what so many people don't realize when we talk about money is, first of all, they're scared to talk about money. I spoke at a conference this weekend, and the first slide I had literally just said, breathe. This is a safe space. Being trauma informed means that you recognize that everyone comes to the table with some sort of trauma. And in the financial space, there is financial trauma. There is parents who lost jobs, couldn't pay bills, being ostracized for wearing clothing from the poor thrift store, whatever meaning people attach to that. And you made meaning as a child and you learned financial habits from your parents and you picked that up and that formed your beliefs and the way you behave with money and your whole money story. So some people in the talk I was giving, it was about debt. People straight up looked in the room, looked at the slides, saw it was about debt. I saw their nervous systems activate and they went and attended another session because they were so activated by debt. And so being a trauma-informed financial literacy coach just means making it safe and acknowledging that a lot of people have financial trauma that they're working through, but we need to have these conversations. They're so important for our own growth.
Yeah, so true. My father was a CFO. I have financial trauma.
Yeah, and it's going to be a very particular flavor to how he behaved with money and what he taught you.
Right. No, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of shame around spending money. And so, of course, what was the first thing I did when I got out of the house is like I spent as much money as I could. And then, I would crawl back to daddy and say, Dad, I need a loan. I have a $400 phone bill. And of course, the shame on top of the shame on top of the shame, leaves an imprint. So I'm glad I didn't pass that down to my kid, but I digress. So women have trauma around money and specifically around debt. So let's talk about the various ways of funding your business, because I serve clients in the services space and some have the mistaken idea that I have an idea for a business and I need funders. So where do I get capital? And they don't realize, I always say, well, do you ever watch Shark Tank? What is the first thing that all of the sharks will ask you on Shark Tank is, how many have you sold? So I think, the first step is getting proof that people want to buy what you're selling. But when is the right time to seek funding, and what is the right type of funding to seek when you first get started?
Well, and I just want to myth bust right there. There is no right way. There is no right way to do this. There is no one way with money. I truly believe that good ideas get funded. When you go to the very basics, Finance 101, and you've got a balance sheet, every single asset on your balance sheet is financed by either liabilities or equity. That's why it's called a balance sheet. The assets equal the liabilities and the equity. That means that a healthy balance sheet has debt. It has a balance of what you as an owner in your business own and have kept as cash in your business. That's your equity. And then you take on debt to grow, but it's got to be good debt, smart debt. And we can talk through what that means. But the types of funding for your business, let's say you do want to grow, you want to scale operations, you want to invest in yourself for an additional credential to provide more services, for example. That requires an investment. That's one of the biggest things people go into debt for. Student debt, to get educated, to better themselves as an asset to generate future cash flows. That is absolutely a great reason to go into debt and get good debt for that. So that might be a great time to get some financing for your business. It may not be about products or widgets. It might be services, as you said. So maybe it's about becoming more qualified. Maybe it's about investing in marketing. There can be a lot of reasons. So what I like to do is, what are your sources of funding? Where do you want to get money from? And what are your uses of the funding? And I think what you're getting at is, what are the right uses to go and seek funding for? You could scale operations, you could create a new office in another location, whatever it might be, a new service, but that requires an upfront investment. And so there's different types of funding for each one of those.
Yeah. So I think rolling back a little bit, number one, debt is not bad.
Debt is your ally. Debt is not the enemy.
I know. And so many women say, I just got out of debt. I don't want to go into more debt. So let's address that issue. And then we'll talk about kinds of debt and when to go for debt. But what about that initial thing, that mindset of, oh, I just got out of debt. I don't want to take on any debt, yet you have no money to start or grow your business?
Well, I love to point to Disney as the source of my financial trauma because I think I saw The Little Mermaid at a very young age. And do you know what my first exposure to debt was? Ursula. She is collecting Ariel's voice as collateral to give her legs to go walk on land. Ariel's getting a loan of legs to go walk on land and meet the love of her life. And you see her signing a contract, and that created so much trauma for a generation of children that never want to go into debt. So I even want to start there beyond the women entrepreneurs. This is starting as kids, right? And so when you have ideas that you shouldn't go into debt, don't buy things unless you have the money for them, that's coming from Depression era generations before us that had those thoughts, that had those beliefs and pushed them down. You don't go into debt unless you can afford it. And I agree to an extent. If you're going to go into debt, make sure you have a plan to pay it off. You may not be able to afford it right now, but part of good debt is understanding the terms, using it responsibly, and having a plan to pay it off. You do those three things and you're investing in good debt, not bad debt. And what I mean by good debt is low interest rate. It is for a purpose. It's intentional. It might be for assets that appreciate in value rather than depreciate in value. For example, getting a car loan, that's for an asset that depreciates in value over time. So that's probably not great debt. But a lot of people use debt to buy a home. A home does appreciate in value. And I'll tell you, a home is a great source of debt because, number one, it's for a purpose, it's intentional, you want to live there. Then actually living there gets you a tax deduction on the back end on capital gains tax. If you live there for 2 years, it's deductible against your capital gains taxes. Your mortgage interest is deductible by the US government, which means essentially the US government is subsidizing that form of debt. And it's generally, not right now, but it's generally a low interest rate form of debt too. You know, I locked in my mortgage at 2.6%. So I'm pretty lucky given current rates now, but that is also cyclical and will move.
So interesting. So let's talk about the stages of growth. So when you're just getting started, one of the things that we talked with to Frank Capra about was securing some money before you leave your corporate job. When you still have your W-2, you can show a source of income before you jump into the entrepreneurial pool. And, you know, what would you say are some of the best ways to get started? So if you're advising someone who wants to leave corporate, start a business, and she needs a little bit more funding, how would you advise her?
I would make sure, first of all, that she has a set of financial statements that are accurate. They need to reflect her business right now as it is, a solid balance sheet and an income statement. You need to know where you are before you can figure out, where you want to be and then create a roadmap to get there. So point A, you need to have. And that means you need to understand your revenues at a very disaggregated level. Like you were talking about, what are your sales? That's the first question on Shark Tank, right? Understanding your revenues at a disaggregated basis, multiple streams of revenues, multiple product offerings, and what each one does, the cyclical nature of them or seasonality, really understanding them. And then looking at expenses. A budget is crucial. Having an idea, if you're thinking of getting funding, you really need to understand how much funding you actually need. You also need to understand who would be a good funding partner for you. Because if you go out into the world and you meet another female investor, an angel investor, and she only invests in tech, and you've got a services business that has nothing to do with tech, you're going to waste so much time just trying to pitch this investor when it's not aligned in the first place. So understanding your needs is important.
So let's talk about sources of debt. You mentioned angel investors, accredited investors, and to do that, you have to be registered as an entity who can accept, and it varies state by state. So you need to talk to someone who's a specialist and understands those laws, because I did a round of funding when I first started the Launch Lab. At that point, it was called the Passion Project Incubator. And I took on individual investors for a 5-year term at 6% with a 1-year gap year.
And this was debt investors you took on.
These were debt investors. So every December, I issue my checks with their, 6% gain, and it's a guaranteed 6%, which is nice to get in certain markets. So you can actually, if you know how to do it, approach individual investors, but there are some legal things that you need to file with your state. And so you need to talk to somebody who's familiar with that. So that's going after accredited investors. And then you have to have a little pitch deck, or I had a pamphlet that talked about women and entrepreneurship and the mission that I was on and all of that good stuff. So that is one viable way. Do you have anything to add to that about angel investing or accredited investors?
Yeah, what I'd love to add to that is you mentioned a magic number, Deb. You said you took on debt investors and it was 6%. Guess what? Your cost of financing, your cost of capital was 6%. Most people, when they invest in the stock market, as an investor in the stock market, you're looking for long term returns in the 14% range, 18% range. I'll tell you, angel investors, venture capital investors, they underwrite to even higher returns. They want to see 20, 25%. Some venture capital investors and early development stage companies, those investors are looking for a 25 to 50% return based on the risk that's involved in the company that they're investing in. There is a direct correlation between risk and return. So when I think about wanting a female entrepreneur to be successful and getting funding and to be successful and launching her business, I want to provide the cheapest cost of capital investing for her, which it means debt. So that's where people really need to understand debt is your ally. It is the cheapest form of investing you're going to get. And you're not giving away control of your company, voting interest in your company to people with loud opinions who want things done a certain way in the day to day and in the long term.
Yeah. And then who want a great piece of your exit strategy. So then you might not be able to execute on the vision and the impact that you have for the business because you're beholden to those investors.
Yeah.
What other sources of debt are there? So we've got private investors, which many people don't even think about. Any advice on how to approach private investors or strategies there?
I think private investors is one way, and I think that's going to be hit or miss. This is about getting connected to people who I call connectors. I know a fabulous one right now who is actually the executive producer of the film Show Her the Money. And she is so in this space that through meeting her, I have been connected to investment opportunities. And through going to conferences like the one I was at this past Saturday for female entrepreneurs, I'm putting myself right in front of other female entrepreneurs as an investor coming out. And once you do that, you can have conversations about alignment and what you do, what you invest in, what you're interested in. Because as an investor, I want to have impact. I think about what's important to me, the change that I want to see in the world, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. So I'm going to invest in those things that are aligned with my personal mission and impact. So finding people, having conversations is the simplest way for private investors. But beyond that, there's small business association loans. If it's available to you, family members. If it's also available to you, bank loans. There are other types of bank loans. Kiva, SoFi, crowdfunding. There's so many opportunities. And there's more and more female-led venture capital funds. I can think of a couple off the top of my head that are also associated with the film.
Wonderful. So what's your advice for which way do I go? Someone saying, I need capital. You've already said, figure out how much you need, have a balance sheet, have a P&L, have a budget. And how do I know, do I go after private investors? Do I go after bank loans? Do I go after crowdfunding? Is there a decision process in there that I should go through in order to decide where I want to focus?
I think there is a decision process, and it's internal. It's an inside job. Because this is about you have your business in your wheelhouse. Let's just say you are a life coach, okay? Your wheelhouse is being a life coach. It's not being a fundraiser. So you could make a decision in your head that I need assistance. I'm going to hire someone who's going to help me fundraise. Their full-time job is to fundraise for me. Go seek grants, go seek opportunities, go network on LinkedIn and find the right people, register for these summits and go meet the right people. You could also make a decision in your head, I only have so much time. I don't have the resources to hire a full-time development person. So I am going to spend my time wisely. I'm going to research people. I'm going to connect to the connectors, see who they think I might be aligned with, talk to who I can, but use my time responsibly. You get to make all the decisions here. This is your business and your funding journey. And there's no right way to do it. It's like Reese's. There's no way to eat a Reese's.
That's beautiful. There's no one right or wrong way to do it. And I'm just curious about your personal journey, what brought you here and what brought this big desire that you have to make an impact with the money that you earn. I mean, it's such a, and I've gotten to know you, Diana, and you have such a huge heart. You have such a huge heart. You're such a huge cheerleader. I know we're both going to cry, right?
We're probably gonna make me cry right now.
Like, what led you here? What were the experiences that you personally experienced that informed this desire and this impact mission you have?
Yeah, thank you. This is a great question. And this is where I get really raw. In May of 2020, my mother passed away unexpectedly. And as a result of that, a month later, my cat passed away too. And I was all alone during COVID, isolated with two of the people and cat that had been my rock and my ride or die and who loved me the most. And I sat there looking at my life, taking inventory and just wondering what the hell my legacy was going to be. What was I doing? I didn't have kids. I didn't have a partner at the time. I had a job where I wasn't feeling any passion. I felt so passionless. And that's not how I wanted to live the rest of my life, spiraling into that predictability, knowing that I was going to end up a spinster with my cats. And so when I got really honestly naked with myself and financially naked with myself, I got a small lump sum of money after my mother passed away. And I used that to really get closer to my personal mission of helping marginalized communities, democratizing access to opportunities for them. I joined the board of an LGBTQ plus scholarship organization that gives full ride scholarships to kids that have been kicked out of their homes and are going to change the world and cure COVID and remove plastic from the ocean, but they just don't have a way to get there. And it moved from there into female entrepreneurs who have ideas that just can't find funding or people don't understand their business. And so it built off of this thing where, I was investing in the stock market. I'll tell you about Peloton stock. I bought it when it was at $150 a share. Do you know where it is today? $5 a share. I lost over $100,000 in just one stock. And I realized these markets are no place for what I want. I'm just not getting what I want there. I'm not finding the impact I want to have. And so that's when I moved to investing in female entrepreneurs as an angel investor.
That's amazing. And investing with purpose. And there are some people who are listening to this podcast that a light bulb just went off for them about, I could use the money I have and invest it differently instead of Peloton or even Apple, which is suffering a little bit these days. But
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, all of the biggies is that you can really invest with a purpose and still get a return on your money and feel really good about supporting and helping someone else.
And invest in other women, in other marginalized communities, in good ideas that should be funded.
Yeah. And Vicky Saunders and what was CEO and now is Coralus is another great way to do that. I haven't kept up with them, but originally the business model was $100,000 at 0% interest as a loan to get you moving. So let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about Show Her the Money. I can't wait to see it when it hits New York. And tell us about how you got involved in it, what the movie's all about, and how can we find out where it's playing near us?
Absolutely. So I mentioned a great connector through which I have met a lot of female entrepreneurs. She's an executive producer in the film, Catherine Gray, and I'm also now an executive producer in the film. So I star in it. I'm one of the films that are that are actually being pitched to by some of the founders of businesses like Dapper Boy and Hustle Up and Eatitude, who does bamboo sheets. And these are disruptors in the marketplace. So backing up, the film is really based around the statistic that only 2% of female-led ventures and businesses and female entrepreneurs get funding from the venture capital world. That is shocking. That is awful. So we want to change that. And a big way to do that, to build awareness, is putting it mainstream, putting it into film. That makes it super approachable for people where finance isn't their first language. And so the film does a really good job of making it approachable for non-finance people to understand from the point of view of founders, funders, and everyone in between.
And so I know you don't off the top of your head necessarily know the schedule, but how can we find out? Because we have listeners all over the US, we have listeners in Canada and in other countries. How do people get access to the film?
Absolutely. So right now, because we are strategically aligning and creating a business and making some money, our first stage is going to get into film festivals. And it's at various film festivals. There's a date coming up in November 10th for Fort Lauderdale, so our South Florida peeps. We have Minneapolis on October 28th. We've got New York City and LA, both with the weeks of December 1st through December 7th. We've got set things. So you can follow the film on social media at Show Her the Money. Showherthemoney.com is the website. And, it's got Sharon Gless, who was in Cagney and Lacey and Queer as Folk. She's in the film. She's an executive producer in the film. It's got Dawn LaFrida, who is a franchisee of Denny's and has opened so many Denny's and become a successful entrepreneur. We've got Pocket Sun, who's the founder of SoGal Ventures, who invests in diversity-led initiatives. And the film is beautiful. It talks about women's ideas, like one company where they do bras for mastectomy patients to make them feel better about their bodies, like after they go through what they go through. Like, I get emotional because these women are changing the world and they need funding too. And so many of you are going to change the world. And with funding, you can do that. And this film raises the awareness.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Diana. And guys, if you want to join me and my posse in New York City and see the film together, reach out to me and I will for sure pull together a posse of people to go to the viewing December 1st through 7th, one of those days. Diana, it's, thank you so much for bearing your heart and soul and really sharing that debt is not evil. That debt is actually taking on the right type of debt is a way of showing love for yourself, of giving yourself the means with which to invest in the assets that will grow your business. And I always talk about building marketing assets. Marketing assets are things that give a return over and over and over again. And it takes money. Sometimes the money might be to hire the best copywriter or to invest in the technology so you can rinse and repeat that strategy. And that there's many options. And I don't think people think about private investing often enough. And connectors. Oh my God, connectors. Like, how do we find a connector?
They find you. Just wait. But I will tell you, a lot of people don't realize you have an idea that you could make 25, 50%, 100% on given enough time. Going into debt for 6 to 10% in the short term to generate those amounts of returns, the time value of money says that $1 in your pocket today is more valuable because what you can do with that dollar is going to make so many returns versus if you receive it later. And that's the concept. If you need to borrow something to, that's going to cost you 6 to 10% now to generate returns of 25 to 50%, what is stopping you? The numbers work out.
Yeah. It's the mind, right? So it's the mind that's stopping you. It's the beliefs from the past that no longer serve and don't really apply in this situation. So Diana, is there anything else you've got going on where we can, tap into you? How do we follow you? How do we keep connected to what's going on in Fan Your Flame?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Fan Your Flame LLC. My website is fan-your-flame.com. I am an investor, but I did not want the domain name without the hyphens because I got to go spend my money on some fabulous women who are going to change the world. So
Oh, so you didn't want to, cough up the $2,500 for fanyourflame.com.
No, that's for someone else to make more money with.
Perfect. Diana, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure hosting you on Life After Corporate.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you come back and visit us again sometime. And that's it for now, my friends. Show her the money. Go look it up. Go find it. Go see it. Support this film. Become an investor if you have the means to, and help other women entrepreneurs and lift them up. It's never too early and it's never too late to decide on a funding strategy. And if you need some support, you need to work through the decision process, reach out to Diana Greshtchuk, and we will put her links in the show notes so that you can get in contact with her. And thank you so much, my friends. We will see you next time on Life After Corporate. Thanks for listening, my friend. If you enjoyed this show, please head over to iTunes and subscribe and leave us a review. And be sure to hop over to the Life After Corporate Facebook group and join other growing entrepreneurs to get weekly tips on how to create more money and meaning doing work you love.